We are so back.
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 I am Calbot. We are so back.
We are so back. Hi everyone, Sothany back Tana here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new Vampire Weekend, Only God Was Above Us. Here we have the 5th full-length LP from your favorite Ivy League blue blood privilege as an aesthetic indie pop darlings Vampire Weekend. A group that, if you remember, came in hot with that Cape Cod Kwassa Kwassa, that multi-genre, multicultural, multi-era music fusion in the late 2000s, and they made some great records with it. In the process, Contra, Modern Vampires of the City, albums that were loaded with tons of catchy, sweet, oddball tunes that went down smooth despite being based on a mind-boggling combination of influences. Be that Jamaican ska or Central African rhythms and guitar lines, contemporary folk songwriters, classical music, hip-hop, of course Paul Simon, big heaping helping of Paul Simon. And the band faithfully stuck to this catchy yet chaotic sound for over a decade, but then went through a bit of an awkward transition with the departure of longtime member, multi-instrumentalist, and songwriter Rostam. He officially left the band in 2016, but has had a few production credits since, including on this album. And without Rostam in the mix, it became painfully clear just how key he was to the band's versatile sound on their following record, Father of the Bride. It wasn't a memorable album, and it's pretty definitively the bottom rung in what is overall a very tight and consistent discography from Vampire Weekend. And while I didn't think Ezra Koenig and the boys would necessarily go back to their old sound on future releases, I did go into this album hoping for some kind of bounce back. And I'm happy to report on this album, not only are we so back, but Only God Was Above Us is truly a return to form in the best way. There are 10 tracks on this thing, cut clean, just a straightforward 10. This track list is not messing around, bringing snappy, sentimental tunes led vocally by, of course, Ezra's very youthful, boyish vocals. Fun production that brings back all of that crazy, mixed instrumental palette, mixed fidelity mayhem. And the band, once again, is showcasing this wild mix of various genre nods, Indian classical music, Congolese guitar licks, Baroque piano breaks, and everything in between. The opener, Ice Cream Piano, eases us into things instrumentally anyway, with lots of lo-fi, fuzzy bits of guitar and piano, building up slowly in the background as Ezra's words project images of war, police, authoritarianism, and using this as a means to explore some kind of interpersonal conflict, or maybe even an internal conflict, with him singing about a singer who doesn't sing, or somebody who makes very bold statements nobody's hearing because they're being put quietly or maybe just not stated at all. But the true selling point of this track for me is honestly the band chemistry, because once this track picks up, Vampire Weekend is rocking with the galloping snares, hammered pianos, buzzing guitars. There are some amazing string sections toward the end of the track too. It is a complete and utter riot in the best way. And the following track, Classical, also begins by firing on all cylinders, pounding drum loops, lots of ride cymbal, which are topped with watery keyboard chords and some spicy, searing guitar leads. Also, as a bass player, I love that upright bass. That upright sounds so good on this entire album. And I love how on this track, and many others, Vampire Weekend is able to assemble something that sounds so methodical, yet also casually tossed together. Like those wild sax and piano trades deeper into the track, that kind of stuff doesn't just happen by accident, happen randomly, but it is so explosive in its energy and performance, it feels like lightning in a bottle. Things do calm down though and get a bit dreamier on the tracks to follow, namely on the song Capricorn, which I don't think has the strongest chord progression on the record, but the vibes are certainly there. The mix hits with just the right amount of reverb to make the guitars and everything sound a little dazzling. And in fact, I wouldn't say Vampire Weekend is just simply looking to hand over a pretty slow burner on this track either, because past the midpoint, things get kind of experimental and harsh, especially with these very brittle and kind of glitchy chord swells on the chorus. And there's also this little solo bridge the song has that sounds kind of like either a guitar or a synthesizer being bent, being stretched to the point where it's screaming for mercy. It's a beautiful racket that I feel like could really only come from Vampire Weekend at this point. Either that or it's a little reminiscent of early Animal Collective. Moving on to the song Connect, though, this track manages to be catchy through a series of very subtle instrumental moves, like the slightly woozy and warped piano keys throughout the track that sound like they're being played off of a broken tape machine. And then the lyrics on the track deal very much in a loss of personal or emotional connection and interest, with lyrics like, I know once it's lost, it's never found, the grit is buried in the ground. And once again, this is yet another track on the album where the rhythm section, especially that upright bass, is sounding killer and really kind of like giving a nice, strong, tasteful, flavorful backbone to the entire thing. Then with Prep School Gangsters, I'm not sure if any band other than Vampire Weekend could put out a song with such a title. But this track as well finds a lot of power in simplicity, with some light toms on the drums, downstrummed guitars. Meanwhile, the lyrics on the track tie into a couple of different themes on the album, namely the idea of a protagonist facing some kind of greater threat or power that they are smaller in comparison to. The Prep School Gangsters mentioned in the title of the song, they're not exactly the heroes of this track. It's at this point, though, we're at the halfway mark of the album, and it's in the second part of the LP that I think things get a little spotty. The Surfer is handily the sleepiest and blandest song on the album by a mile or two. Production-wise, there's not a whole lot that stands out about the track. It's kind of washed out. The instrumental palette is very average in comparison with some of the other songs here. There's not a whole lot of cool or interesting breaks or transitions. Even the hook doesn't really stand out, and I think Ezra's lyricism could use some work, as well as some of the similes are a little basic and even a little redundant in tone or framing, like this mention of broken bodybuilders or runners losing races. Then there's Gen X Cops, which I will admit did stun me as a single, especially with these wild, punky, kind of gothed out lead guitars. The performance is good, but I feel like lyrically and narratively, this song feels kind of redundant in the progression of the album, that once I heard the entire thing, I kind of got a sense of how conceptual and heavy on the narrative side the story all of these songs cumulatively was telling. But yeah, there are other rockers on the album that also deal in cops, deal in war, deal in conflict, deal in authoritarianism to some degree. And this track, again, also kind of brings a lot of these ideas up, but doesn't do it in a way where it feels like there's any kind of further expounding on it, no extra revelations. Mary Boone, though, is pure magic, with its sparkling piano chords, its head-nodding beats, its cascading string layers, and churchy, frosted choral vocals. I mean, this track is already a banger before we've even gotten into the lyrics, which are very potent in their emotions of longing and yearning. Following this, Pravda is one of my favorite tracks here by far. This song helps also bring the story of the record to a conclusion, because it is very much about leaving, separating yourself from a person or situation, with a lot of allusions to Russian culture in some of the framing and some of the references, with Pravda being the Russian word for truth, and Ezra talking about taking the family balalaika. But yes, he also sings about this person's consciousness, whatever is weighing on that, not being his problem. Yeah, he has very much had it with whatever this dynamic is that he's dealing with and referencing in his songwriting. And then with the closing track, Hope, we have a bit of resolution with a very dissonant instrumental finish, which is kind of fitting and cathartic, despite the fact that we're leaving at a point where it doesn't feel like things have completely fixed themselves, because what Ezra is hoping for on this track is that despite the outcome, the conflict, whatever is going on here, having some very bad results, he kind of hopes that, yeah, everybody can just kind of move on, get past it, let it go. And given the way the record has progressed up until this point, I would say it's probably the most fitting closer you could imagine. I'll say in comparison with some of Vampire Weekend's back catalog, I don't know if the highest highs are quite as high as my favorite moments off of Contra or even Modern Vampires per se. But what I can say is that I think throughout this album, the songwriting melodically, lyrically is absolutely killer and on point. In fact, I love that most, if not all, of the songs across this album all kind of tie into a series of experiences and points of view that are very cohesive, very focused, because there are some very clear themes that Ezra is pulling from some personal experiences and putting into these songs, and simultaneously he kind of frames a lot of it around these ideas of, again, police, war, authoritarianism, stuff that I think is a bit more observable and universally accepted and experienced in the wider world by a lot of Vampire Weekend fans. So it's as if the album could sort of be experienced on a couple of different levels. On top of this, I will say, as far as the production and instrumental qualities of this record go, Vampire Weekend is sounding as creatively quirky as they ever have, which is great. And then I'll say one more thing. I feel like this album kind of breaks Vampire Weekend's very awful, very bad habit of, in their track lists, having at least one or two just painfully annoying, unlistenable, obnoxious songs that I usually have to skip or just, ignore their existence entirely. And yeah, this album is completely free of that. In fact, it is a very smart, well put together LP that, as far as I'm concerned, is just really no skips. Like, the lowest moments on this album are listenable, are a vibe, and the best moments are fantastically performed, written, produced. So yeah, absolutely fantastic and impressive record from Vampire Weekend. I'm feeling a light to decent 9 on it, in fact. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video you can check out. Hit that up with a link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Vampire Weekend, forever.